This time on Psychic Investigators. In Napa Valley, 2 young women are stabbed to death in their home.
Large amounts of blood, just horrendous.
A third roommate survives.
In a few minutes' time, my entire life was changed.
How could this happen in our Napa?
Police have the forensics, but no one to tie it to.
Who am I missing? Who did I forget? What am I overlooking?
A psychic says, look closer to home.
They knew this person. There was no question about it.
Napa Valley, the heart of California's idyllic wine country. A place of vineyards, breathtaking views, the good life, and if nothing else, a safe place to live. And then, Halloween 2004.
This is 911 emergency. What are you reporting?
Oh my God, we got attacked.
Who attacked you?
I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Most of my roommates are hurt. Oh my God. I think they're dying. I just want to die. Do you know who might have done this? Oh God.
When the police arrive at the house on Dorset Street, they find 2 women dead. The scene is so gruesome, a female officer feels ill and has to leave. More police descend on the house.
The homicides had occurred in the upstairs of the residence. As we approached the staircase, there was an enormous amount of blood.
Detective Kirk Primo was a 14-year veteran with the Napa Police Department. Not wanting to contaminate the evidence on the stairs, Detective Primo uses a ladder to get his first look at the carnage.
Large amounts of blood, just horrendous.
A double homicide. Leslie Mazzara and Adriane Insogna, both 26.
I always live by the rule of the crime scene's always at least twice the size as what it appears.
Outside the house, one of the first pieces of evidence Detective Primo finds is a pile of cigarette butts.
They didn't appear to be weathered. They didn't appear to have been there for a long time.
The lone survivor of the vicious attack is 28-year-old Lauren Meanza. The bedrooms of Adriane and Leslie are on the 2nd floor. Lauren's bedroom is on the 1st floor at the back of the house.
I got a phone call, so I went into my room and took it, and I heard Adriane say goodnight, and that was about 10, I think. I went to bed about 11, and probably by 11:30, the house was pretty quiet.
By midnight, the young women are sound asleep.
I had never heard anything like it. I knew right away that it was something awful. And then I went to my door and stood kind of in the doorway under the stairs. I heard a male flying down the stairs. I figured I was next, not knowing what to do. I ran into the backyard. I've never, ever felt that terrified, like I was in a horror movie. I thought I was going to die. It was quiet except for screaming. I heard him kind of leave the house. Adriane, which I knew was her voice, she'd stopped screaming, but she was calling out for help. There was blood everywhere. Adriane just lying down next to her bed. She was alive still, but I could tell in her eyes she was gone. I had never really seen someone die before. To the right of Adriane was Leslie lying face down in a pile of clothing. I just turned around and went down the stairs, and I called 911. In a few minutes' time, my entire life was changed. I'd lost my friends, my roommates, and I'd been left untouched.
The only one who lived to tell the tale, police turned to Lauren for answers. Who would want to kill her roommates? Leslie Mazzara had moved to Napa about 6 months ago and landed a job at the vineyard of Hollywood legend, Francis Ford Coppola.
Leslie was very, very outgoing and very spunky. I had never met anyone like her. Just warm and Southern hospitality, everything. Guys really liked her. Everybody kind of was drawn to her.
Adriane Insogna grew up in the area. and was an engineer for the city of Napa.
Adriane was different. She was much more, she was mellow, very good friend to people, just very smart individual.
These girls were tremendously well-liked, had tons and tons of friends, very social. There was no obvious motive that stood out as to why this crime may have happened. This was not going to be an easy case to solve.
For days, crime scene investigators worked the house. The killer entered through a push-up window. There, they find fibers and what they hope is his blood. Nothing appears stolen. He's left no fingerprints and no weapon. All the evidence is sent for testing.
Well, the first reaction from the community was just shock and disbelief that something like this could happen in our quiet little Napa.
Marcia Dorgan covered the story for the Napa Valley Register.
People were worried, they were scared. I mean, they didn't know if they had a serial killer out there running around.
But the police don't think the murders were random. They think this is a crime of passion.
A pattern of the blood evidence that was collected, the anger and aggression.
The autopsy results support their theory. Cause of death, multiple stab wounds.
Focus was that the killer may have been an acquaintance or someone known to Leslie, as Leslie did leave a more active social life.
Leslie just attracted males. She had a lot of men interested in her.
2 weeks later, the town of Napa holds a candlelight vigil for the two murdered women. Police methodically question hundreds of their male acquaintances, starting with their inner circle. But after 3 weeks, the police are no closer to identifying the killer.
Daylight savings had started, so our days were very short, unfortunately. So any darkness, I couldn't stand.
Lauren and I, from the day of this incident, we met or talked on the phone daily. Lauren was very eager and very helpful in the investigation and wanted to be kept abreast.
So much evidence to process and so many potential suspects, the police are overwhelmed. And then something unexpected. A friend of Lauren's makes an appointment with two LA psychics, Marti and Michael Perry.
Allie had called me to let me know she was going to see the Perrys, go have a reading with them. She said that she would call me afterwards and let me know how it went.
The Perrys work as a team. Marti, an artist, claims to sketch what the spirits show her.
It's almost like automatic drawing. I get images of the people on the other side, and very often I'll have artists on the other side work through me. I'm in control, but I'm not.
Michael claims to channel them.
A medium's purpose is to be the vessel through which a deceased person communicates to a living person without getting in the way. It's like conscious possession. I'm there with you, but I'm not.
Allie records the session and tells them nothing about the murdered women. Michael Perry appears to fall into a trance.
I have two people here. One says my first name is A. She took that party. They said their life was taken. I can feel stabs up here around my neck, or my neck's cut. Murder. They're saying murder.
Two young women are stabbed to death in their Napa Valley home, while a third roommate escapes. 400 miles away, a pair of psychics claim to receive messages from the spirits of the murdered women.
Michael got on the phone and he said, I need to speak with you. And we set up an appointment for a phone interview or reading.
Marti and Michael felt that they could possibly help out in our investigation. I told Laura that I was open for anything.
A month after the murders, a phone reading is arranged. Lauren takes notes while Michael and Marti Perry record the session. Marti allows spirits to guide her hand as she begins to sketch. while Michael enters a trance and establishes contact with the murdered women, Leslie Mazzara and Adriane Insogna.
You know, she's the loudest one. She's the talker to me.
Michael had told me that Adriane was coming through more clearly. She had a very analytical mind, so she was definitely in the forefront of everything, whereas Leslie kind of stood back.
She says you'd have stayed, you'd be dead too. You understand?
Adriane knew that I had left the house. She would have not known I would have left the house unless she was already past and seeing things.
Michael claims to see the female police officer who first arrived at the murder scene.
She couldn't take it or didn't want to be in there. She left, didn't she? This is what she says.
When I heard that, I was very surprised, and I looked over to Kirk. I said, "Did that happen?" And he said, "Yes." That kind of sealed it for me.
You know, I had goosebumps just like she did. Those were details that were not released. Those were details that were kept very private as to not inhibit the investigation.
All this time, Marti Perry has been sketching the face of a man.
I did ask the girls on the other side to send me an image of the perpetrator. The biggest feeling was the goatee. When I get a facial hair, and I'm drawing it, I start itching all over the place, and that's what I was getting when I was drawing that.
After the session, they emailed it to me, and I remember looking at it. It actually looked familiar. I wasn't sure why.
Could this be a portrait of the killer? Detective Primo adds the sketch to the case file in hopes it will trigger something.
This could be for real.
Perrys were interested in coming up and meeting with us in person, and so he definitely wanted to pursue that.
DNA results from the blood taken at the crime scene identify 3 people: Leslie, Adriane, and what police believe is the killer, a white male.
But these women were very popular women, and they had tons and tons of friends. Leslie had ties to so many different cities and states that they had to do all of that, and they just interviewed people.
Police ask all of the women's male friends to provide voluntary DNA samples.
There was several pools of individuals to be interviewed and to be sampled.
It wasn't just a local police department investigation. There were several state and federal agencies involved.
There was a lot of high and lows periods during the investigation when we felt that we might have somebody whose DNA was eventually going to come back and be a match to what we had. And then there was the lows when those didn't.
Over the next 6 weeks, DNA results eliminate suspect after suspect. Police are no closer to catching the killer.
We knew we had what it was going to take to link our assailant to the crime. It was just finding that assailant.
Looking for anything that might help to solve the case, the police meet with the psychic couple, this time in Napa. Michael Perry claims to connect once more with one of the murdered girls, Adriane.
I said to Lauren, "Who's Lily?"
Lauren can only think of Lily Prudhomme, Adriane's best friend.
They worked together very closely, so they knew each other well from that. Adriane, when I met her, lived across the street from Lily.
The two were so close that Lily had postponed her wedding so that she and Adriane could travel together. But what could Lily have to do with the murders?
There was no way that I even would second guess any Lily or anyone related to Lily being involved with this crime. Something I completely dismissed. I didn't even write it down in my notes. Focus was more on Leslie. So anyone kind of on Adriane's side was not as heavily focused on. So there weren't a lot of flags going up at all.
Lauren felt just as I did that it was just Adriane's best friend and that it really didn't have any significance other than Adriane was trying to maybe get a message to Lily.
Maybe there are more answers at the house.
Lauren was clearly traumatized. You could see it.
Yeah, she didn't want to go to the house.
I quickly learned my limitations on what I could give and what I couldn't.
Even before the police officer and the psychics enter the house, Michael Perry claims to key into the crime.
I said, "Oh, there are blood splats that you found out on the porch." I said, "That's his blood." And he said, "Yes, we believe so." I said, "Oh, the window opened up And he climbed in through the windows and he found blue fibers on the windowsill. Kirk said yes.
Inside, no evidence of that horrific night remains. Michael Perry goes straight upstairs.
I knew immediately which room it had happened in.
Michael ran his hand along the banister and it stopped and said that he believed the killer's blood had been located on the banister in these locations. In fact, that is where it had been found.
So we stood in the room for a while, and of course there was nothing there. It had all been cleaned out. I remember saying to him, you found one girl here and you found the other girl here, didn't you? And he said yes. Adriane was doing most of the communicating with me, and she told me that the other girl had been stabbed first, then attacked Adriane. She put up a big struggle.
Then, Michael Perry says what the police already suspect.
I strongly felt that it was someone they absolutely knew. There was no question about it in my mind that they knew this person.
He has one more message from Adriane.
She kept referencing a boyfriend.
Months after the stabbing deaths of 2 young roommates in Napa, a pair of psychics give police a name they claim comes from the dead women themselves. The name, Lily.
Adriane's best friend, Lily, who was engaged at the time to a gentleman by the name of Eric Koppel, had come over and done some work on the dryer at the residence. Eric Koppel's name had not surfaced. An interview actually had been done with Lily, his fiance, who was a co-worker of Adriane's.
The police have interviewed over 1,000 men, but not the 26-year-old land surveyor, Eric Koppel.
I added him to my checklist. He was the 11th item on the checklist to make contact with him, to do an interview, and obtain a voluntary DNA sample. When I first saw the picture of Eric, the first thing that stood out was the sketch that Marti and Michael had provided and how accurate it was, looking almost identical to Eric. It also put pieces together, such as what Lily meant.
Before he can interview Lily's boyfriend, Eric Koppel, Detective Primo is taken off the case.
My rotation to rotate out of investigations was about to come up. I created this checklist to which I passed on to the incoming detective. The list was never followed up upon, and Eric was never contacted.
The investigation inched along for nearly a year. Leads dried up, and no more tips were coming in.
Lots of community pressure, lots of community uncertainty, and the pressure was that we need to solve this.
And no one wanted answers more than Lauren Meanza.
I was fearful that it would just be forgotten about, I think, and become a cold case.
It was finally decided through the department that we would go ahead and reveal the brand of cigarette that had been collected and sampled DNA the night of the homicide. A rare brand, and one that had been introduced not long before the crime had occurred.
DNA on the cigarette butts matches the DNA of the blood found at the crime scene. Blood, the police believe, belongs to the murderer.
We didn't associate with any smokers, and then I stopped. I thought, you know, Lily smokes, and so does her boyfriend at the time. They smoked. So I gave them Eric Koppel's name.
September 22nd, 2005, the police released the distinctive brand of cigarettes to the media. Camel Turkish Gold. Eric Koppel's brand. 5 days later, accompanied by his now wife, Lily, the quiet land surveyor turns himself in.
Was shocked at first, and then it kind of made sense. He didn't stick out, but he kind of just survived under large personality of Lily.
No one in the community, and especially people that knew him, thought that Eric was ever a suspect, let alone a killer.
Eric Matthew Koppel is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, lying in wait and using a knife.
He was fearful of losing Lily. He was fearful that Adriane was convincing Lily to leave him. And their wedding had been called off, and he blamed Adriane. Adriane and Lily had planned a trip to Australia together, and so he was just deathfully afraid of losing her. So his answer was, kill the one that's in the in the way of my happiness with Lily, kill the problem.
On Halloween night 2004, Eric Koppel admits he drank heavily at a party, during which he quarreled with Lily. A few hours later, armed with a knife, he entered the house on Dorset Street through an unlocked window. He creeps upstairs, and at this point, the sequence of the attack is only known to Eric. But in the end, Adriane and Leslie lay dying in Adriane's room after being repeatedly stabbed. Adriane was the intended target. It seems Leslie Mazzara may have died trying to help her friend.
Still today, I can speculate on why he didn't touch me or, he avoided my room. I'm not sure. It'll always be a question, so.
January 2007. More than 2 years after the murders, the quiet land surveyor faces the court.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty, Your Honor.
His wife, Lily, who the Perrys had named as key to the case, was there at his sentencing.
Eric, there is nothing in this world that you could do to make me love you less.
I am a broken man. Oh, it sucks. A man splintered by penetrating awareness of my own potential for wickedness.
And it is ordered Eric Matthew Koppel is to serve a life sentence without possibility of parole.
Finally, some closure for the family and friends.
I was just so thankful that there had been a resolution to everything.
After having gone through this and having the experience of working with mediums, don't overlook. They may be a very good asset to your investigation, and at least they may be a small piece to that puzzle that you're missing.
I felt Adriane was a very strong personality, a very determined girl, and that she was determined to put this guy away or do something about it.
And that's what we do this for, is to help heal people, help realize that there is another side, and that we don't die.
The first night when I was questioned, I asked, what do people in my situation generally do? And Kirk had said, people don't generally survive in this situation. They're usually killed too. Experience with the Perrys has given me a faith that after we pass, that we can still have a connection to the ones we've loved in this lifetime.